Welcome to Le Corner, La Source's digital show dedicated to the sport and entertainment industry. Every 2 weeks, we invite a professional to share their experience, background, and challenges. The sport industry moves fast, and having their insights is the best way to keep up to speed. Welcome to Le Corner.
Soon in Sevilla, the much-anticipated World Football Summit will take place, and Micheal Broughton will be one of the speakers. For this new episode of Le Corner, we had the opportunity to discuss with a 20-year experienced sport consultant specialized in tech, finance, and investment. Micheal has occupied senior management roles, giving him a unique perspective on the executive capabilities of the sports sector. He has worked closely with clients like Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, the FA, and Honda Racing F1, amongst others. From 2018 to 2020, Micheal was also leading the technology and investment strategy at FIFA. In this episode, we discuss the most lucrative investment areas to develop a sports organization: data, digital, NFTs, how, when, and where to invest properly for an efficient growth. 2, 1. All right, let's go. Hello, everyone. Glad to have you here for a new episode of Le Corner. Today, we have the pleasure of receiving Micheal Broughton. Hi, Micheal. How are you?
I'm really good. Really good. Delighted to be here. Delighted to see you guys and to speak again and hear what's up in the world.
Very nice. Very nice. And today, we haven't done it in a while, but JB is also here alongside me. How are you doing, JB?
All good. Good morning, everyone. Refreshed from the vacation.
Yep. Nice. Great. So, let's get cracking with it. Micheal, can you give us a quick introduction of yourself for the rare people who might not know you?
Yeah. So I sometimes, if I ever get invited onto a stage in the post-lunch element at a conference, I refer to myself as the devil incarnate. So I've worked in alcohol, tobacco, finance, pretty much all the sins of the world other than drugs and prostitution, which, I'm only 44. I've got time ahead. Where I kind of see myself at the moment is a bit of an interpreter, because I'm not an engineer, but I understand what technology is trying to achieve. I'm not a banker, but I understand what finance is trying to achieve. And really, I'm a commercial executive in sport, so I understand the commercial realities and politics of sport. And I really try to find a way for those three things to actually find a way of working together. So, yeah.
I'm glad for this introduction, because it really feels like even myself, if I was asked to describe Micheal Broughton, I wouldn't know how to position him in the sports landscape. But it's a bit of a mix of everything. I just did not know that you went through alcohol and tobacco industries before actually joining the sports one.
No, it was part of how the best to start in sports is to sell products that everybody wants using sport, which everybody watches. So I sold cigarettes and Lucky Strikes, and then Johnny Walker whiskey with Formula One teams. And I used to love it because people would say, "Oh, wow, you're doing a really great job." I'm like, "It's not hard. Everyone wants the product I'm selling, and everyone watches the sport. A bad job, you should really go for me, but a good job it's kind of hard to screw it up."
But working for Lucky Strike and Johnny Walker, you already had in mind of that was your entry gate to the sports.
Yeah,
to the
sport. Always sport. Yeah. I'm a failed athlete, so I figured if I'm going to be willing to get up early and work late, it's got to be where I'm having fun. So I'm lucky enough that IMG took me on as an intern, paid me 50 quid a week in 2001. And just got lucky.
Yeah. And where did it go from IMG? Tell us a little bit more about your evolution to the sports landscape.
Yeah. So I think the jobs they were offering there were 14 grand a year in London. And for some reason that wasn't appealing to me. So I took a jump out after whatever it was, 4 or 5 months, and worked for a sports marketing agency called Jardine Communications, which is now, many years later, part of Chime Marketing. So CSM is how it's known. I did 7 years around motorsports. So yeah, cigarettes, alcohol. It was touring cars, superbikes, F1. And then my mentor, a guy called Paul Nolan, who was leaving the FA to set up Nolan Partners, the headhunting firm. I think I'd interviewed for a job actually at what was to become Chime, but it's a separate part. He said, "Oh, don't take that. Come work with me." So I was his first employee, headhunting C-suite roles in the sports industry. My first meeting was David Richards of the Premier League, the chairman of the Premier League, Sir David. The next one was the CEO of Celtic, Peter Lawwell at the time, and just radically changed. I refer to it as actually a bit like doing an MBA, because you had to work with the NFL, the NBA, horse racing, cricket, rugby, football clubs, and you've got a week to figure out what the hell the issue is in their organization. And you're talking to the chairman and CEO principally, and you're trying to find top level people. I mean, my introduction into technology in sports was the CEO, Ian Watmore of the FA, saying, "I want a chief digital director, not an IT director, a chief of digital."
What year was that?
2008.
So what year was that in, Micheal?
Yeah, that would have been 2008. And he was really trying to figure out how he would have leverage against broadcasters. Right, because in the UK you don't have a lot of competition. There was basically 2, maybe 3, and he wanted to be able to go into the negotiating room and say, "I can go live on IPTV, and I can go direct to the consumer." So he was well before his time, and I had to go away and figure out, well, who the hell knows how to do this? What is digital and not IT?
Yeah.
So literally, I mean, and then I have to interview all these people and sound like I know what I'm talking about when I'm interviewing them. I then have to make it clear to the FA I've understood the brief and can find the right people. And you have to learn really quickly in that gig. So I had great time doing it. I never wanted to be a headhunter, though. It wasn't like it's my driving ambition. So yeah, it was fascinating. The guy we found for the FA, I think, stayed over 10 years. So I like to think we did a pretty good job too. So, but this is going to sound really cocky. What I struggled with as a headhunter in 2008, 9, 10 was I would often walk out of the room and go, "I'm the smartest guy in that room and I shouldn't be."
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair with your cockiness, it is something where digital was barely a word in 2008. I mean, it was webmasters. It was the very beginning of social media. I would say that the digital world really took off in 2014 around the World Cup in Brazil, probably. That was. So to be fair, nobody knew what digital was. So to be fair with your cockiness, it's really a thing where digital wasn't anything in 2008. You had webmasters back then. 2014 was really the kickoff of the digital era, with the World Cup 2014 providing a wide range of solutions at a wide scale. And I know that there were a few hiccups along the way there too. So it's probably fair that doing your due diligence to be able to hire the right person against you, you probably had more knowledge than they had in the room to begin with.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's 2022 and I still find some of them are in 2008, maybe. Not for lack of trying, though. Like, you've got to be honest about the industry. It is definitely trying hard to catch up. Just we've got a lot of ground to make up, right? Would be my view. Some places have done an amazing job. Others are struggling. Others have spent budget but spent it in the wrong places. So, it's... I teeter in sports. One day I can be super optimistic about where we're going because I am a bull on the sports industry. And on other times I'll have a conversation with somebody and, this organization they work for still doesn't have a basic CRM system. And you're going, well, you've got to start somewhere. That felt like something you should have started a while ago. And I'm not asking for them to have built, the spaceship. Just, get on the journey. Anyway, so, it really depends on who you meet on what day as to what, at the end of the day, whether you need a glass of wine to celebrate or a scotch to commiserate.
It's exactly that. But it's partly why we are in this industry, right? It's because the opportunity is so big, but there's yet so much to do. It is frustrating, and I totally hear that message. And I know that we have regular chats with JB about sometimes being utterly frustrated at certain organizations or you just feel like the basis isn't being covered, whereas the means are there to have them covered. So that's a big thing. And that's also why we obviously are in a position to try to understand innovation. But there's also the digital fundamentals that have to be the start. And so I was going to ask you, what does innovation in the world of sports mean? But maybe I can rephrase it in a what are the fundamentals for you in the digital sport landscape that you should have covered right now, and what should you be looking at for the next few years?
Well, I think the first bit is start, right? Just start. To me, one of the biggest issues is we've used for too long the excuse of, well, it's about the product on the field as the reason not to invest off the field, right? Because as long as you're winning, people will come. And you sit there and say, yeah, but only one team can win, right? So the very premise upon which we say that we have that argument internally in the industry falls over on step one, because at the end of each season, whichever sport you are, only one team has won. So some would have had better seasons than others. Some get relegated in some sports and so on. But if you only depend on results on the field, when 99% of you will lose, that doesn't make sense to me. The logic just doesn't stand up. So the second bit I'd say is it's not zero sum, right? We're all too easy to be like, digital transformation means I can't have traditional revenues. Like, no. Like, if you can still sell good sponsorship and broadcast rights, sell them. But be ready and start building what is your digital infrastructure look like. Selling B2B doesn't mean you should ignore a D2C. So vice versa, right? Just because you have a direct-to-consumer product doesn't mean you shouldn't be selling B2B at the same time, right? It shouldn't be either or. And I think from there, it's my personal view would be hire somebody senior in your organization who understands what is digital and technology and can premise it around a commercial conversation, right? So they may be engineering by background, but I would probably say they're more commercial by background, because the job is you need to make money because you need to pay the way.
Yeah.
But you need to hire someone who is sitting around your management board table, preferably even higher than that, who genuinely understands where is the world going on a digital sense. So he can guide you, right? I'm not asking you to throw 10% of your budget at digital. I'm not asking you to hire somebody who can hold that language and can help educate you at the very top level. I spent a little time working with a group called the Digital Consultancy. Mm-hmm. And all they did was go into major corporations like BP and explain to them what digital meant.
Yeah.
And it didn't mean, and I remember when they went to BP said, well, we need an app and a Facebook page. And like, well, a Facebook page for BP is a dartboard.
Yeah.
Right? You're just going to have vitriol thrown at you because your fossil fuels. It's not going to be pretty. And why do you need an app? Your biggest challenge is that in 20 years' time, all vehicles will be electric, and you've got 22,000 forecourts around the world. What are you doing with that land? What's the business model? What's the digital model for cars in the future? Like, it's not about solving an app. And I'd say it's the same thing with sport, which is it's not about having a Facebook page. It's not about having an app. It's about what actually is happening to our industry. Where is the fan? And now start thinking about how you can get to that, which might still be via selling sponsorship and broadcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's a funny thing because every time we talked, and we talked a lot with JB about it during his days at UEFA, is that there is a notion that in general, broadcasters are overpaying the rights for the premium content that is currently football, for example. So there's probably not a way where you can internalize that and have a proper digital strategy that allows you to monetize it in a better way, right? So all those D2C platforms that all those federations are creating, those leagues are creating, can be challenged to some extent if they come with the wrong strategy against it. So that whole notion of selling, but there's also the notion of, and there's the notion also of going to grab the community where it is, right? The younger generations, which are at risk for the currently for the sports industry, are very important, and you have to go find them on social media. But on the other side, there is indeed that notion of how do you capture first-party data to be in control of your fan base, right? So those three very fundamental elements. How do you actually position it? Because there is that notion. And one thing that you said that was also super interesting is I do genuinely believe that one of the issues in organizations right now is that the person on the digital side of things isn't business focused enough, right? So there's like a budget for digital, then there's the commercial team that has to bring revenues, but that there's a meaningful gap between those two verticals inside the organizations. So how do you go about solving that? And how would you strategize? Because we're going to get to tokenization. I have some pretty fixed ideas there on how to go about it when you're a club with your existing digital infrastructure and power of achieving digital impact. But
so I think the first step is you're going to need the infrastructure in place, right? So I remember going into FIFA, which is where I first met JB, and it's quite good fun as a man from UEFA and a man from FIFA sitting in a room trying to dance around the edges about we all need digital transformation. How do we do this? But you need the bedrock. So you go into FIFA, it's like, well, we need you to make money out of digital. And we go, that's great, but we don't have any tools. Right? We had no CRM system to speak of. We had a very old school way of making content and distributing it that was non-broadcast. Before the Women's World Cup in 2019, it took me 4 months internally to get approval to use GIFs in 2019 because we've sold moving picture. And I get it. I totally understand where they're coming from legally.
Yeah.
Every single broadcaster and sponsor was using GIFs. Like, we need to be at least with the times. So if you're not going to allow us to have the tools, we can't make money from digital. Right? But you then get into trouble because you haven't made money from digital, despite the fact you haven't been given a tool. So you're kind of stuck in this cycle. So the first bit is, you need to set in the tools in place in order to do it. And as we move on to tokenization and what happens next, you have to remember that if you haven't done the basics, it doesn't matter what you layer in above.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have a proper data and CRM platform, you can do all the Web3 you want. If you're not capturing the data, it's pointless at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to get your Web 1 and Web 2 right first.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, and it's too bad. JB is facing a little technical issue, but debating between UEFA and FIFA and how the whole legal framework is actually one that is limiting the digital impact that you can bring is something that's super interesting. Let's move on to to tokenization, because that's one of the big topics that we're all involved when you work in the digital space. We're all looking at it. Once again, with all the statements that we've been making over the last 20 minutes now, how would you approach it as a club?
How would I approach tokenization? I think it very much depends on what kind of club I am, what kind of sports organization I am, right? So if I'm a top tier team in a top tier league, so Big 6 or 10 in England, Premier League, top 4 or 5 in Spain, and so on, I would have one very different approach to others, right?
So actually, let's simplify the question. Let's take the top 10. If you were one of the top 20 European clubs,
I would make damn sure I control as much of the rights as possible for as long as possible. That would be my starting point. Do
So
not
you would build internally your own.
my own capability. I'm partnering with somebody because if I'm Man United, I can't build a blockchain. So I need partners, but I want to control it, right? I want to own the IP going forward. And the reason I say that is my take on tokenization is it should enable us to do what we dreamt of doing with Web 1 and Web 2. Right. So ultimately, what Web 2 for me did was demonstrated that there is an enormous appetite for sport and sport content around the world 24/7. Right. Okay. It's changed how we consume it, but it never ends. It never ends.
Yeah.
But the only people who've really made money out of it are the social media channels.
Yep.
I cannot think of a single sports organization team that can sit here today and say, I made millions of dollars directly from my social media.
Yep.
Which causes a problem internally because they're all building media houses to create content, but it's a cost center. Right? And the way they justify it is against, well, my sponsor's spending X and I need to give him content to keep spending that money with me.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. Let me chime in real quick. It feels like the clubs that want to become the media houses are approaching it like the broadcasters in the 2010s and aren't anticipating the future shift of the industry that broadcasters are trying to go in the direction of.
Yeah, 100%. And so to me, if you let's say you built your media house, and most of them are pretty good these days, but they're all much of the same. Right? You know, they're hiring the same people, they're hiring the same things. I always laugh whenever Man United refer to themselves as a media company, and you go, but your media company makes $10 million a year. Yeah. I know that because you're a public company and you report it. But you generate 600 million. So clearly you're a sponsorship, licensing, and ticketing business with a sidebar on media. And until your CEO came from Disney, I'm not going to believe you.
Yeah.
Right? That would be the pivot. You go, whoa, okay, that's different. But again, I think if social media has demonstrated all ages across all different platforms want sports content, then Web3 should allow us to go, okay, because all forms of media can be tokenized. So now you have a choice of how you want to monetize it. Right? Yeah. So it's not just about distribution. Now it can be about ownership. It can be about monetization. Some of it should be loss leader. Some of it should still be fill the funnel, which is Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. Right? But where's the funnel go? At the moment, the funnel doesn't go anywhere. Right? Yeah. Hopefully, and there is no answer yet on Web3 because we're so new on it. We're all trying to figure it out. So I'm not going to pontificate on what this is the answer. What I want to see, and this goes to your questions around innovation, is people try. Right? And we're going to make a few mistakes, right? The problem with sport is your mistake will play out in public.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's funny because I was thinking, so would it be fair to say that if we consider some of the big clubs out there, your strategy would be close to what Liverpool or in some ways a PSG is doing, right? They are both getting the money from the big platforms like a So Rare. They're both launching internal strategies that they're trying out that are arguably failing, but they're still trying to build their own, like Liverpool had a big launch that people say it worked, people say it didn't work, most people say it didn't work, but whatever, it's a question of angles. But would it be fair to say that you would be following that strategy of getting some of the short-term money, but mostly trying to build and take the risk of having bad experiences for your fans to begin with in the process of learning how to go about it?
So my starting point would be I'm delighted to see them experimenting and trying. right?
Yep.
And I don't have an issue with them doing a deal necessarily with Sorare. The Sotheby's thing was an interesting choice, but again, at least they're trying it and they're trying to figure it out. On the Web3 perspective, one of the questions you need to ask yourself is the usual rights cycle that we've ingrained in particularly European sport of 3-4 years. How does that change by the fact that Web3 is technically immutable? Right? That it doesn't get deleted, and therefore, okay, you've now taken back the rights and you're selling them again, but it's not like a sticker book, right? That NFT that you sold with Sotheby's will still be there in 3 years' time, whether you have a right with them or not. So to me, I love the fact they're trying. I love the fact that they haven't given everything away. But I would probably be thinking of it more of a case of I want to completely rethink what is loyalty, what is a marketplace for a club. And part of the marketplace is content, right? And how do I create via Web3 a true loyalty program that isn't just about the fans who come to the venue every week?
Yeah.
So again, it has to come back to the fan. If you don't start and finish with the fan, you're going to make way too many mistakes and you'll lose all credibility.
Yep.
If you think what Liverpool did, the best bit about what they did was they tried to really educate their fans on what it meant.
Yep.
That to me was the best bit of what they did. Okay, they didn't sell as many, didn't generate enough money. They tried to really take a journey on their fans of, if you're buying it, this is what it means, this is why, this is how it works, this is what a digital wallet is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just feels, and it's funny because I generally think when people ask me what I think about Web3, it's just the idea, the 2022 version of what a loyalty card must be. It's just a simplified way of proving your loyalty, of having everything in a centralized digital wallet where everybody wants to have it versus trying to have some cards or whatever it is that nobody wants to hold in any case. And it's a simplified way. And it's a great way of having direct transactions between different people where there's no middle layer, which is the sense of the story in any case for every single business, way beyond sports. So it's interesting. But I do think that the one of the elements is that there were a lot of drops and there was a lot of marketing activity. We have to go in the direction of utility.
Yeah, I mean, I put out my fan flywheel earlier in this year, and to me, that kind of it drives at the utility, which is again start and finish with the fan. What do they really want, right? And then try to provide it for them. The tricky thing is, you really have two very different audiences, right? And the first audience comes to the games every week, and they're like me. They're hardcore. They get upset when you concede a goal. They live and breathe it, and they feel like they truly own it. But the vast majority of your audience never gets to your venue, and we haven't yet, via Web3 or any other format, figured out how you market to the two audiences in different ways and appeal to them in different ways without upsetting the other one.
Yep.
Right. So, again, if you're investing in a football team right now, it's really hard to understand why you do it based on the stadium and the ticketing sales.
Yes.
Right. Because if you actually look at it, once you've built a new stadium, your revenues have plateaued pretty quickly. Right. And, can you really afford to build a new stadium is the other question. Right, so you know what your gate income is, and how much can you raise ticket prices? Not much.
Yep.
So your sponsorship market is getting pretty flat. And at best, all the research reports that I ever read talk about 4.5% to 6% CAGR growth. So you book that in if you do a good job. Maybe you'll slightly outperform. Your broadcast, you don't control.
Yep.
right? In the vast majority of instances, it's centralized.
And it's probably plateaued as well.
And particularly in Europe, where there's less competition, where there's more competition, like the US,
Yeah.
obviously the rights are still going up. And why everyone in Europe is praying that, Amazon, Apple, and everybody spend money, Netflix spend money to try and boost their subscribers in Europe via sport. But if you look at it at that premise, the three main revenue streams are flat.
Yep.
Right? And go through the Deloitte money report that's just come out. I haven't looked at this year's one, but I've often used their charts as the example of literally put them in a PowerPoint presentation. Say, look, all these football clubs, their revenue is effectively flat.
Yep.
So unless you win the Champions League, it's flat.
Yeah.
So if you're then buying in on the premise of each of these clubs actually has access to 400 or 500 million people who are interested in them, let's not go down the argument as what's a fan and what's a follower and what's an interested party. But let's just say there's 500 million people for the big clubs who are genuinely interested and want to follow in some format. How you make money of them is what Web3 and Web2 are about. Because you're already making the money from the 50,000 who show up.
Yep. Yeah, no, and it's just a question of messaging. Also, we know from our perspective, it's how you make money, and it's also how you provide them with an experience that gives them a reason to actually spend that money through different ways beyond your traditional. If you're an international fan, your traditional merchandising purchases.
Right, and that goes to my fan flywheel started with the Amazon one. Right, I literally downloaded the Amazon flywheel, had a look at it, and went, well, theirs is predicated on the customer comes first, and the customer experience must be amazing. Give them lots of choice, get it to them quickly, and everything else will sort itself out. Only then do they then layer in the other elements. But the customer is number one. It's really clear.
Yeah.
How many fans feel like they come first?
None.
Right.
None.
I think it's actually, you thought about it for about 2 seconds and then you came.
Yeah, no, I thought about it because I was going to say the socios model, but it's the exact opposite. In reality, it's the exact opposite what's going on at that club. So there is that notion of some people used it as a marketing tool to try to say we put our fans first. But the reality is I don't have an organization, or at least once again, if we look at the top 20 clubs, I don't have an organization that puts the fans first. No, and I would argue that there's a reason to it too, right? But yeah, I hear where you're going with it.
Yeah. So to me, again, what's the biggest innovation? Put the fan first.
Yeah.
Right. So if you put the fan first, that still means, by the way, one of the most important things is the players on the pitch, whatever pitch that is. Right. Yep. That doesn't change that.
Yeah. But if you have the fans, you will have the choice of the players.
Right. But fans first, maybe players second. Again, so I remember listening to a conference and somebody was talking about, I think it was Wimbledon. And I used this example a few times. There were 7 or 8 bullet points on the slide that was presented. And every single one of them, you nodded and went, yeah, I get it. Like, heritage is important to Wimbledon. Like, yeah. Right, all white, not branded everywhere, heritage, classic, da-da. And the last bullet point on the slide of 8 said the fan comes first. And I started laughing because I said, well, they come 8th.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, just the order that you put them down on paper tells me where they actually fit. If you just took that bottom one and put it to the top of the list,
the rest of the list would be radically different.
The way you interpret the other 7 will be different.
Yeah.
Heritage is still important to Wimbledon. But under the framework of the fan comes first, what does it mean?
Yeah.
Right? From there, how do you then, and this is why I think technology is so important, is, again, only a few people can get to Wimbledon every year. Only a few people can watch it, actually. Only a few people get to a football stadium in a year. So the only way to get to that broader audience is tech. It's the only way. And now some tech is traditional and it's a broadcast linear TV. It's still technology.
Yeah.
Right. We on this call tend to get more excited about some of the latest stuff that's coming out. But again, we're still looking at it through the lens of, well, how do I get that to the fan or the athlete or whatever it may be, whatever sphere of innovation we're looking at, so that the experience is better. Which in the inverse, if the experience is better, the fan are having more fun, you're going to make more money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, I've sat in the room where, I remember this guy from one of the biggest technology companies in the world said, "You guys all think of me as a retailer, but I'm not. I'm a data company, and the data tells me that I need to be in retail. It also tells me that if I want to sell more retail, I need to be in content. And the data from there, from what I'm seeing, is that if I'm in basketball and football, they stay longer. And the longer they stay, I know how much money that will generate for me."
Yeah. Yeah. Smart way of reading how you're building a business or explaining how you're building a business. But yeah, I mean, the whole notion that first party data is the new gold is something that is super relevant. And that's why it's all gone to the social media. And I think that Web3, a lot of that shift is actually choosing as a user where your first party data goes to. And as an organization, hold that first party data to provide a better experience for your fans versus for a global international media, a global social media approach, I would say. Look, we could talk about this for one more hour, I'm sure. But one of the other angles of Micheal Broughton's hat is the financial one, and this is something I don't want to miss out on, because in some way you're very close to innovation and very close to the startup money. You're also very close to the end game where you were involved in a few potential acquisitions, or at the very least your opinion was asked, and in some you were actually involved. How do you position it? How do you position yourself? How do you go about it? And how do you have the clear difference in the way you approach it with according to the people you're talking to?
So the biggest challenge there's a few questions to unpack there. I got into it because back in 2010, that point was I just didn't see, people couldn't use us because they didn't have enough money, so they couldn't get enough good people. And I sat there and said, there's some really good businesses in sport that just are undercapitalized. And if you could recapitalize them, you could hire better people. If you hire better people, you'll build better products, you'll build more fan relationships, you'll make more money. Like it was a virtuous cycle that I could see. And I pitched that to my old man who I wanted to work with. No one was doing it, so we started, and we had 8 great years, which was primarily looking at relatively small businesses. And seeing the challenges of startup money, Series A, Series B, that kind of level. And trying to learn what it was that investors looked for. Trying to help the innovators of the world figure out how to translate what they wanted to say to investors, but also to clients, which is 2 very different dialogues.
Yeah.
Right? And it's even crazier when you have the unique challenge of everyone wants to get to Silicon Valley, so they build this hockey stick curve. But then they talk to me, and I'm British, and go, I don't believe in hockey stick curves. But I want them to happen. But the 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 in your Excel spreadsheet, which equals me being a billionaire in 3 months' time, is unlikely to happen. Let's rethink how that works. Da-da-da.
Yeah.
Where I've always approached it from it is, and this is a challenge on both sides of the story, is what actually is your pitch? So if you take the Chelsea example, where, it was funny, I was in Madrid having coffee with Michael Sutherland, another great innovator who I really admire. and my phone started going mental in my pocket, and I had to go and answer it, and it turned out that Chelsea was being sold. So I called my father and said, we need to try and buy Chelsea, which sounded completely ludicrous as a fan of the club.
Yeah.
Who, it was quite funny explaining to my children, no, we do not have the money to buy Chelsea Football Club. We'd probably live in a bigger house if we did. But you sat there again on the premise we talked about earlier of, well, the stadium's sold out, the sponsorship is X, and you sat there going, well, how would you rethink it? And so to me, that was sitting down with the investors was, this is how I see the commercial model, right? This is where I see, yes, I think Chelsea, you could see why building a stadium there would make sense. You could see where they had left money on the table from sponsorship.
Yeah.
But the returns from fixing those two things, given the capital outlay, are single digit at best.
Yeah. But
actually, okay, how do you reimagine getting to 400 million people around the world? And what would that look like? And what is, and for me, I'm literally writing on a sheet of paper the tech stack I would put together. Right? And some of the parties, like yourself, like my friends at PTI and other places, that I would call in and say, right, what's this need to look like to be effective?
Yeah.
Right? What are the companies that you two know and have seen and like that I should be bringing in as part to this? That, because I'm a bull. I don't believe there are less people watching sport. I think the way they're watching it is radically different, and where they're at and the amount of time.
Yeah.
And every 10 years, you see these reports saying the next generation isn't consuming sport. So, well, no, they're not consuming it the way we measure it.
Yeah.
But then I watch kids, and I've got an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, and the way they engage with sport, it's just different to me.
Yeah.
Right? I've now got my 11-year-old who can sit down and watch 90 minutes of football with me, which is for me very gratifying.
Yeah.
But it's been crazy. He's playing Madfoot and things like that whilst watching, and he's got one. He's only got an iPad, but he's got 3 different screens almost on the go on the iPad, playing different things whilst watching the game. And so to me, you have to try and figure out where the future revenues are for them. But again, private equity, particularly, one of the challenges, they'll model the past going forward. Right? So they'll say, show me the last 5 years of accounts.
Yeah.
Now we're going to layer in X% CAGR growth on these things going forward. And they get to a model. And I go, yeah, but you're missing 2 whole new lines.
Which is where your growth should be coming from.
This is where your growth should be coming from. And because there's no marketing budget currently in sport, they forget to put in that there is a cost to building that out.
Yes.
Right? So because sports don't do marketing, that's what they sell their sponsorship to a brand who will hopefully do the marketing for them effectively.
Yeah.
When I look at the D2C opportunities that are out there, I always laugh because sometimes the content isn't great, but even when it is, they forget the amount of money that the Skies, the NBCs are spending on building an audience to come to watch it. Yeah. This goes to my field of dreams of build it and they will come. It's like, well, it's a bit more complex than that.
Yeah. Audience tends to be, it's better to start with the audience to monetize. History has proven us that on web too.
Yeah. But sport, again, with considering how pessimistic some people can be about sport, I do laugh given how many investors are keen to get in.
Yes.
Right. So internally in our industry,
is it for the new bad reasons though? People in the past were invested in clubs and were covering the loss of their club because there is that kind of, I'm part of the group. Is there a new trend at a bigger scale in that regard?
Well, the numbers just got so big. Right? I mean, how many individuals can afford these things now? They can't, right? So then it has to be institutional money because they have the deeper pockets. But we have a dichotomy, which is, well, we want our sport to professionalize, but we don't want the consequences of professionalization.
Yep.
Right. I remember being on a train back from a Liverpool game, and people on the train being disgusted at how sponsors and VIPs took so many tickets and how unfair it was and so on. And in the same sentence saying, it's ridiculous that we haven't spent another 50 million on a striker.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, what is it you want? And what they want is the cake, the icing, and the cherry. And I'm a fan, so do I. Right? So, but you have to understand that if you want that 50 million striker, you need to do something different. And the institutional money might be required.
Yep.
Where I get nervous around investment in sports is I don't always feel like the sports rights holders have been very well advised. So that makes me nervous because it means that the people on the other side of the table know something you don't know.
Wait, so when you said the sports right holders, are you talking about the broadcasters who acquire the rights?
No, I'm talking about the actual rights holders, the actual sport.
Okay.
Right. So,
not the RHB. Yeah, you're talking about the one who actually own. Yes. Okay.
They own it, and they're going to sell 15% or 50% or whatever it may be. And it's because they need cash, effectively. And that's fine. That happens in every business. But I generally, when I look at the consequences of the deal, I've typically gone and said, well, even when I'm advising the investor, I'm like, well, that feels stacked on the investor's side. Like, why are they so much better informed than the person doing the selling? Is it because they just need the cash and they need it now? Which, okay, that's real.
Yeah.
Particularly post-COVID. So that just makes me twitchy. That makes me twitchy. And you've seen all sorts of transactions happen where you go, okay, well, I feel like that's a sweetheart deal for the investor. Sometimes I'm annoyed because it was me who missed out, and I'm like, I would have liked that sweetheart deal. Let's be honest.
There are investments though recently where I feel the club or the owner of the club leaving the club is the big winner out of it, because I tend to think that we were seeing only great investments for European sports, but that there are some that are starting to be very irrational from my standpoint, and not necessarily the bigger ones. I'm talking mostly about the mid-range, the low-range ones.
And so I would 100% agree with you if you did it on the premise that you've bought it at that price, but you're not changing the business model.
Yes.
Right. So if your business model remains, I'm going to get a 3% increase in tickets each year, a 5.5% increase in sponsorship sales, and every 3 or 4 years, the central rights holder is going to get a 5% increase in distributions for me. But I'm going to overpay by 20, 30% now because I want to get a hold of this long-term asset. And you sit there going, well, that's nuts.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
If and I've yet to see this, if actually one goes, I'm going to do that, but I'm actually doing it because I have a totally different way of viewing how I'm going to monetize the fan. I'd like to see how they're going to do it. At the moment, what I find funny is I still see people going, no, what we'll do is we're going to do all this, and it's going to be a trading game of players and athletes. And I haven't yet seen that work.
No. To be fair, it was at least in France for the French model, some almost were. COVID bit them in the butt, but it looked like they were getting there.
I mean, my challenge with the European Super League was not that they came out with a European Super League, because the Champions League is effectively that in the first place, right? It was more a case of what they actually said out loud was, we have a problem, so we're going to fix it by diluting our actual product. Because what makes Chelsea Barcelona so sexy is it happens every now and again. When it happens 5 times a year, it's not so sexy.
Yeah.
Right? But the view was, no, we're going to carry on doing exactly the same business model, just fewer of us. It's like, but that doesn't actually fix the problem. The problem is the fan feels like he's held away from the club and he doesn't feel engaged and he's being beaten up by the rights holder. You've just said, yeah, but I'm going to charge you more to watch more of my fewer of my games. I'm like, well, that doesn't fix it.
Yeah.
Like, you'll get a really cool response for the first 2 years and you'll applaud yourself. And then suddenly, because it works in Excel. So to me, I like the fact that they were trying to think a bit differently, but the fact that they landed on the same business model but fewer was ultimately, to me, wrong.
Yeah.
It didn't solve the problem because it wouldn't have made a difference to the 400 million followers around the world. They wouldn't have driven another penny from them.
Yeah. I think they were indirectly trying to solve for another problem as well, but we don't want to go too much into the weeds of it. But I think that they were trying to find an answer in the wrong way to an issue that they feel is happening in the governing body. Yeah, and just one other thing is, obviously, you appreciate the investment groups investing in European sports, right? I think, from my perspective at least, it allows to reduce the gap between tech companies, sport tech companies, and those governing bodies, which have historically been moving super slow. They can't anymore because they have private money that's looking for return on investment that is shaking things up.
So where I think going to be interesting is how the smaller organizations are waking up post-COVID to they need to invest in innovation and technology because actually they no longer have a choice.
Yeah.
Right? They're dying. No one wants to admit to it, but they're dying. So because they haven't changed their business model in 100 years.
Yeah.
But guess what? The fan has changed in the last 5 years, let alone last 100. So, and it's therefore, there's plenty of life ahead of them if they can figure out what is it that the fan wants. But again, the fan needs to come first for you to figure that out. So I think what you're seeing is, and this is my advice often to investors and to startups, don't chase the Man Uniteds of the world. It's really hard for them to turn that around.
Yeah.
They make a lot of money. If they want to be profitable, they can be profitable. They have a tech stack. The process is highly competitive, and they're going to nail you on price. Like, okay, you get to put a lovely sticker on your deck that you do Man United or whoever it is, right?
Yeah.
If they allow you to use their logo.
And one thing that is important about Manchester United, they're probably one of the rare clubs that have had shitty results, but loyal fans, stable revenues. So it's one of the rare brands in sports that is actually managing that.
Right, but again, so they're I mean, it always reminds me of Chandler and the episode of Friends when they got the sofas, the new armchairs.
Yeah.
And there's a fire alarm going off, and they put their hands down and they go, nah, it's not hot yet. So it's there. And you're sat there going, well, if the building's on fire but your room isn't hot, that doesn't mean there isn't a fire outside. So my view would be, I'm excited for investors and technology companies to chase after the tier 2 teams and tier 1 leagues.
Yeah.
And tier 1 teams and tier 2 leagues type thing, who you could talk about Feyenoord being one of those, right? It's a top team in a second tier league. But how does Feyenoord, which to me was always a big traditional brand, stay relevant in the modern world? Well, if it just relies on filling the aging De Kuip Stadium, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So if I was advising a technology business, I'd be saying, look, they're the kind of people you need to get to because they can see that their broadcast rights are not going to double, triple. Their sponsorship isn't going to double, triple. The ticketing isn't. So if I'm going to survive and thrive, what does that look like? Well, it probably means I need to do things a bit differently. So I think what COVID will hopefully have done, and I think you've seen this a lot already, people start to embrace technology more, start to look at how to set up themselves better. And that's where I tend to say, look, I love what someone like Horizon have done. Every week I turn on my LinkedIn and they've announced another partner.
Yeah.
Not all of them are big partners, but they've built this groundswell of clients. And I think they're going, well, I really quite like that because now when they walk into the big boys, they go, look, okay, we got 200 clients. It works. And I was in Supernor as an investor, right? The digital billboard replacement business.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges, and I argued against this at the board, was, well, it's unprofitable to work in tier 2 sports, so we just need to chase the Premier League and Formula One or whatever.
Yeah.
My view was, but it's too high risk for them. If anything goes wrong on the broadcast for Formula One or Premier League game, like your business is finished, so they won't take the risk.
Yeah.
So it's better to have built a reputation that you can deliver results at a lower level and then go up to the top tier as a startup. It doesn't mean you're not asking to work with the Premier League, right? But again, it shouldn't be, going back to what I said at the very beginning of this call, an either or. But I always believe that investors, if you want scale, what does scale look like? Well, it's not just winning Man United.
Yeah.
Right? Because how many big clubs are there?
But so I'm going to challenge you on that one because obviously I'm on the side of where I pick what I believe to be the best tech startups to present them to the network of sports and say, hey, helping you with the shortcut, look at those guys. They're the ones that are going to make you win money. In all the startups that I work with, there are challengers who are looking at what this organization is doing, repeating, imitating, killing you, just low bidding you on every single opportunity they have. So they're ultimately killing the business in some way for everyone. And I have one example of one of the competitors of one of the companies I represent who are going with that strategy. Great acquisition of clients. Honestly, I respect them for that. I'm like, you signed 50 clients in a year? Kudos. Like, regardless, good job. But they just raised 1 million euros based off of that. How little money are they making to acquire 50 clients? How much money are they losing to only be able to raise 1 million? And so they are going with that strategy, but it's kind of killing the whole sports tech space in some kind of way.
Yeah, so I am completely with you on that. And my advice would have probably not have been quite the same way for them to go about it, which is actually, if you have something of value, charge for it. And I'm paraphrasing because that comes from Mark Andreessen. Right? My challenge is, that sounds like somebody who's undercharging in order to get in and build scale. But once they've educated the market that it's not expensive, you can't take the price up. Right? So
exactly, you can't go from 1 to 4. You can go from 1 to 2, but you can't go from 1 to 4.
So ultimately, that company is setting itself up to fail, would be my view, because it will never get to the margins that will make it interesting to people.
Yeah,
it might end up being an okay lifestyle business for somebody, would be my personal take.
Yeah,
without knowing obviously who they are. So to me, again, I'll steal from. I remember listening to a Bill Gates interview, and I think that it was really interesting because he said it was very good to have. I can't remember, was it IBM? I think was the big client, right? And IBM were painful because they were so demanding. But where they were building scale was with all the other clients. So there was this really interesting analogy of that in order for us to grow, we couldn't rely on IBM. But in order for us to get the great product, we needed an IBM to show us what good looked like.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's not an either or. It's not don't go after Man United. if they're doing an RFP, bid. Because at the very worst, they say no, but you've learnt where, why, and how, and spent time with them and go, look, what did we get wrong? So that when Chelsea comes up or PSG comes up, you're better prepared to try and win that one. But if you're relying on just winning the Man Uniteds and PSGs of the world, it's a pretty small pool and it's highly competitive. Right? It is where you can make the most margin down the line if you've got the right business model. Right? But how many have I seen that have gone into even a Chelsea or a Man United and they go in and they're all ballsy about their product. You look at how great my product is, and they turn around and say, I'll tell you what, your product is amazing. You pay us for the honor of working with us, and you keep all the upside. Right?
Yep.
And they milk them for money, and a year later they've ditched them and moved to somebody else.
Yep. Yeah, no, 100%. And it's a funny one because I'm always, if I had to build another startup, it would be one where I would pay a bit of upfront money to take a lot of the upside, because I do believe that that's the way that those clubs work, because they're better at taking short-term money than building the strategy by paying with something that's going to make them generate much more revenue, or at least in our current digital landscape, which is too much driven. To get back to your initial point, by digital is a center of cost versus digital should be chaperoned by somebody that has the bigger business vision around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Interesting. Look, Michael, we're about an hour. We know by doing our research that people don't listen to more than 1 hour podcasts, even though we could go for another one. But if we can just wrap that one up, you had tons of references, tons of quotes. You alluded a couple of times to some of your mentors. What can you suggest in terms of books, quotes, leaders, clubs, organization to look at? What would be your one or two maybe suggestions to our audience?
My favorite book, I forgot who wrote it, but right now I think my favorite books are Kevin Cayley's The 13 Technologies That Will Change the World, or whatever it is. And the other one is The Future is Faster Than You Think. And I like them both because they're optimistic, and I'm generally an optimistic person. I think it's eye-opening on what technology can do for us.
Yeah.
And you can go back to reading Abundance from a few years ago and Peter Diamandis. My biggest thing, though, to encourage people is ultimately sport is in the consumer industry. Right? It's a subsect, but it's a consumer business. So go away and read things about the consumer world. Right? Don't get so engrossed in sports business, Sportico, Sportcal. These are all really good. Have them. Subscribe to them. Keep up to date. But read Fast Company, read Inc., read books from people about what is the Amazon way. And the point of that is there should be one or two things in each of these books that you read that you can sit away and go, well, what would that mean for my industry? So my favorite was always Moneyball. And people refer to that as data analysis. And I don't see that as a data analysis book. That is a competitive advantage book.
Yeah.
What is my sustainable competitive advantage? In that book, it's on base percentage. Right? Yeah. But Billy Beane knew that once he'd done it, everyone would follow. So what's the next one he needs to move to?
Yeah.
Right? It's about competitive advantage. Well, again, and mine will move, right? Which is learning more about Amazon and Apple and people like these consumer businesses. How do they put the consumer, their fan, first? And then from there, how do they spin the business up? Right? And I try to take little bits. It's not a direct correlation. Right?
Yeah.
So don't try and force a direct correlation. But sit down with people like yourself and then have the debate. Well, I read this about how Amazon works, and that seems to do this to our business. Okay, well, what is the impact of media rights on that in a 3-year cycle?
Yeah.
And how does that change what the Amazon model is? Because they don't have a 3-year cycle they need to worry about.
Yeah.
In their traditional business, not their prime business.
Yeah. 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 what it makes me think about is you need a lot of distance in terms of your day to day versus what's the bigger strategy, and try to shape bigger concept inside of it. And which is one of the things that clubs are having a tough time in their whole digital transformation of not just thinking about the next Saturday around the corner. And I think that that's a great way of.
But the great thing is, again, don't blame the fact there's another game in 3 days' time.
Exactly.
I made an offer to a top tier football club to inject €1 billion. Literally €1 billion, underwritten, to put it in. And the response was, we can't talk, we got a game this weekend. Not a million, it was $1 billion. The B. We have a game this weekend. I was like, that's nuts. That's the very top person at the organization saying have a game.
The offer is off the table.
Like, that's just crazy, right? You're not thinking straight.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to take my deal, right? But you should be sitting down and having a conversation. What does this mean? Amazon doesn't stop for 3 months in the middle of the summer to figure out what its next cycle looks like. If Amazon's down for 10 minutes, the world knows about it. So you cannot use the excuse of, well, we have a game this weekend as your excuse for, I'm on this treadmill and I just can't get off it.
Yeah.
Name a business that isn't on that treadmill.
Yeah. Yep. We're going to bite-size that. We're going to bite-size this moment. We're going to bite-size it. Terrific, Micheal. Great exchanging with you. Thanks a lot for your time. I'm sure our audience will love this episode.
Fingers crossed. Lovely to see you guys. Appreciate the time and look forward to seeing you in person again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Once again, don't hesitate to like, share, talk about it around you. And we look forward to hosting you for another one.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoy it as much as we love creating them. If you like the episode, feel free to comment, rate, and share with people around you. You can visit our website, www.lastsource.io, to learn more about our activities. You will discover a wide range of articles and can subscribe to our newsletter to receive the latest tech and sports news in your mailbox every month. Stay tuned for new episodes.
Le corner.